Okay, well, thank you for joining today's webinar, Understanding Drops, Essential Strategies and Insight for Public Safety Retirement. My name is Hank Kim, and I'm NCPERS Executive Director. Today's program is part of our Center for Online Learning, which provides remote continuing education to public pension trustees, staff, other fiduciaries, and stakeholders. Today's webinar will delve into the growing popularity of Deferred Retirement Options Programs, also known as DROPs, among public safety members, especially as some advocate for their use to mitigate staffing shortages. Leading us in today's webinar are Ryan Gundersen and Aaron Chochon. Ryan is a senior consultant with CavMac. He is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps and has been providing actuarial valuation and consulting services for retirement and OPEB systems for nearly 20 years. Likewise, his colleague, Aaron, is a senior actuary with CavMac and has been providing actuarial services in the public retirement sector for almost 15 years and has experience with a wide range of state and municipal retirement systems. We encourage audience participation. Please submit your questions by using the Q&A function on this platform. Your questions will be addressed at the end of the session. With that, Aaron, Ryan, I'll turn over the webinar to you.
Thank you, Hank. I'm Ryan Gundersen. I'm here today with Aaron Chochon. We're both from Cavanaugh Macdonald Consulting. We're going to go over understanding drops, the essential strategies and insights for public safety retirement. First, we want to thank Hank and NCPERS for giving us this opportunity to present the webinar here today. And we want to thank all of you for being participants in the webinar. Before we get into it, we have a few disclaimers. We are not attorneys. While our discussions focus on real-world examples, we cannot speak to the legality of any of these provisions in your location. And also, we're not experts on every drop program. So please contact your actuary if you have questions regarding any provisions of your drop or implementing a drop for your retirement system. With that, as we go through the presentation, I'm going to give you some background on drops, and then I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. He's going to discuss the design elements of drops. Then we'll finish off with the drop cost neutrality and also drop alternatives. So let's get started. On slide 3 here, we have our drop history. Drops or deferred retirement option programs were first started in 1981 with a East Baton Rouge parish, and it covered public safety and general employees. At the time the drop was implemented, the retirement system was offering a post-normal retirement date longevity pay increase. And the members had to elect before this pay increase if they were going to enter the drop or not. And this was to intend for the drop to be cost neutral, because their drop benefits that would be deposited into their drop accounts would be based on not having that longevity pay increase. Then after 3 years, this drop was added to the Louisiana Municipal State Police Plan and then the State Firefighters Plan. In the mid-90s, drop popularity took off with early adopters including Louisiana, Oklahoma, Dallas, and Hollywood, Florida. And many of these early programs were only for public safety employees. And the reason for this is public safety employees generally are eligible to retire earlier than general employees. So there's incentive to try and keep them in the workforce. Fast forward to today, and drops are very common, particularly in the public safety area. Drop provisions vary greatly between retirement systems. This is very true. Each retirement system should tailor its drop specifically for its own needs or its goals that it's looking to achieve. The provisions can vary based on their drop participation length, the percentage of monthly benefits credited to drop, interest crediting rates, COLAs, and employee contributions. Aaron's going to dive into that in a little bit. It's also important to know that the cost impact of a drop is difficult to assess. We can't know what members' behavior would have been in absence of the drop, and that's one of the most difficult things to determine. Members also become a hybrid of an employee and a retiree. That is, once they enter a drop, they are technically a retiree where they start collecting their benefits into a drop account. Even though they're not paid until they exit the drop, they're still collecting them. And they're also an employee because they're still collecting a paycheck. Some provisions implemented provide a cost savings. An example of this would be a drop that starts at age 60 when the normal retirement benefit would be payable, but it continues employee contributions for the drop participation period, let's say a period of 4 years. That would provide additional contributions coming into the fund, which would provide a cost savings. Other provisions can increase costs. Say you have an interest crediting rate that's higher than what your plan actually returns during the drop participation period, that would have the effect of increasing some costs. On the next slide, we have some incentives for the employer and the employee on reasons for having a drop implemented. Number one, I think the number one reason an employer would implement a drop is to retain experienced employees. For a police or firefighter that typically retire between ages 50 and 55, this is a way for the employer to keep them in the workforce for another 3 to 5 years, or however long that drop period is. It's also a way to attract new employees, depending on how well you market your drop to new entrants coming into the fund or coming into the fund. It's also a way to predict more predictable workforce planning and manage broader employment costs. If you have a drop that starts at normal retirement age and continues on for a length of period, you have a better sense of when these members are going to be retiring from the drop or exit the drop, because they have to satisfy a certain number of years in order to receive their drop benefits. This gives you a better idea of, okay, now we need to start planning for new hires. We know X number of people are retiring in the next couple of years. Now we need to look into training for new hires during this time. And for retiree healthcare, it's the same thing. If a member could retire at age 60 and receive retiree healthcare right away, if they enter a drop, they're delayed into getting those retiree healthcare benefits over the drop participation period length. So that helps you better plan for retiree healthcare costs for when members are exiting the drop. On the employee side, receiving a lump sum without reducing your benefit at retirement is very attractive, and probably the number one reason why employees would want to enter a drop. It's also a reward for long service, especially with a backdrop, with your retirement benefits being paid along with your drop account balance immediately when you select it. That's rewarding you for the service that you've already achieved. And it also, another incentive is receiving a subsidized early retirement without leaving employment. If you have a drop program that starts a couple years prior to your normal retirement date, that's a way to subsidize your early retirement benefit payments. So there are two types of drops when we talk about drops in general, forward drops and back drops. A forward drop is the most common drop, or what you think of when you hear of drops. And here, a forward drop allows the employee to have the retirement benefit calculated at drop entry. This benefit is based on their pay and service as of that date. So any future pay increases or service increases do not count towards their benefit. This benefit is then deposited into a notional account where it can accumulate interest credits, possibly COLA credits, all dependent upon plan design. And then this amount is payable as a lump sum once you exit the drop after your drop participation period ends. Then your normal monthly benefit payments continue at that point also. The difference between this and a backdrop is a backdrop. You could go on to the next slide, Aaron. A backdrop allows a member to retroactively participate in drop. That is, when they reach normal retirement age or when they're ready to retire, they would select a backdrop date prior to their normal retirement age to calculate their drop benefits. This would be, a period of 3 to 5 years prior, depending on your plan design. And then those benefits would be calculated using the pay and service as of the backdrop date. Those would accumulate in a notional account as well, but they would be payable as soon as you elected the drop. So the main difference between a forward drop and a backdrop is, with a forward drop, you're entering it and continuing to work. With a backdrop, you're selecting the drop and then receiving the benefits immediately upon when you retire. This is a great benefit to the employee because they have all their financial information available to them, whether they're going to retire under their normal benefit structure or under the backdrop structure. They'll have this information. They'll be able to select their best benefit that is their best option for them. But this also can lead to anti-selection, selecting against a plan, which would increase costs to the employer. One thing about backdrops compared against forward drops is that there's less predictable workforce management. And again, it's because backdrop, you're retiring, you're receiving your drop once you retire. These next 3 slides, we have examples on the cost impact of a forward drop and their effect on member behavior. So looking at the top blue line, we assume the member would have retired at age 60 if no drop was available. Their benefit would start at age 60 and their contributions end. So this would be a normal retirement benefit structure. And on the bottom line, we're assuming, or we're saying that an employer is going to start a drop starting at that same time, a forward drop, starting at age 60. The drop period would be 4 years, and they're going to require employee contributions to continue during this time. So in essence, you have the same benefit structure on the top and the bottom, but on the bottom, those benefit payments are going to be paid into a drop account, but you're going to continue to receive employer and employee contributions. So this would result in lowering the annual plan cost because you're receiving more contributions to pay for the same retirement benefit. On scenario 2, we have the same blue line. So the normal retirement package says you could retire at age 60, your contributions will end, your benefits will start. But now the employer has a drop program that starts 2 years prior to your normal retirement age. So you're subsidizing those early retirement benefits for 2 years, but your contributions are also extending 2 years past your normal retirement age. So just looking at the chart with all things being equal, you'd think, oh, well, this is probably cost neutral because you have your contributions extending past when they normally would contribute to be able to pay for those early retirement benefits. But it really depends on what the plan design is. What's the interest crediting rate on that draft balance? Is it higher than what the actual returns were? Are COLAs being applied? How long or what percentage of the benefits being applied to the benefits being deposited into the drop account? So all these different factors play into whether this is cost neutral or if there's going to be a cost savings or an increased cost impact. On scenario 3, we have the same structure up top, retired age 60, and now the employer is offering a drop election at age 56, so 4 years prior to your normal retirement date. So here your benefits start 4 years early, so you're getting the subsidized early retirement benefits, and then your contributions end at age 60, the same time they would end under the normal benefit structure. This would cause an increase to the plan costs because you're not receiving extra contributions to pay for those early commencement of retirement benefits into your drop accounts. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Aaron. He's going to start jumping into design elements of drop.
All right. Well, thank you very much. As Ryan mentioned, there's a myriad ways to design a drop program, and certainly in our experience, it seems to be limited only by the plan sponsor's imagination. There are several elements to a plan's drop design. For instance, how old do members have to be and how much service do they have to have in order to participate in drop, otherwise known as the eligibility requirements? For how long can members participate in drop? Is there a limit at all? Some plans actually allow members to participate in drop for as long as they like. And then once a member elects to participate in drop for a certain period, can they change or even revoke their election? What percentage of their accrued benefit, Ryan touched on this earlier, what percentage of their accrued benefit should be credited to their notional drop account? And then should participants receive COLAs during drop? How should the interest crediting rate applied to drop accounts be determined? And then what kind of payout options are we going to allow once members leave drop? And then finally, should employee and employer required contributions continue during drop participation? When trying to establish a new drop, some plan sponsors will sort of instinctively look to their neighbors and ask, can we just do what they're doing? However, a better starting point may be to instead ask, what goal are we trying to achieve with our drop? In general, one of the strengths of defined benefit plans as compared to defined contribution plans is the ability to design your plan to achieve goals, even going beyond retirement security. And there's no reason why we can't approach the design of a drop program the same way. And also having that kind of end goal in mind helps contextualize the conversation for us actuaries and consultants, so that we can better answer questions like, is this a good drop design, or has our drop been successful? Possible goals include retaining experienced employees, rewarding long service members, attracting new hires. If you have one neighboring town who offers a drop but you don't, then maybe they're having better luck attracting new hires than you are. And then also another potential goal is to simply provide a relatively cost-neutral benefit option for members. And as Ryan touched on just now, due to the unknown nature of member behavior, it's hard to know exactly whether or not a drop is truly cost neutral. But this whole idea of cost neutral is something that we'll return to later in the presentation. So the first design element that we're going to dive into is the eligibility requirements. Some possible eligibility requirements that stand out to us are, early retirement, normal retirement, and then also, something that goes even beyond, something more strict than even normal retirement. Regarding early retirement, the idea here is that some public safety plans allow for subsidized early retirement because typically employers want public safety members to retire at younger ages than, say, teachers or judges, due to the physical requirements of their work. However, members may feel like they're losing value to their benefit if they don't take advantage of the subsidy. So allowing them to enter drop at early retirement means that they can get that value and continue to work, thus helping to retain more experienced members. So it's a way to help retain members if for instance, you're an employer who has a lot of members who are taking advantage of early retirement. However, I will note that this early retirement eligibility is not something that I personally have seen much of. More common is the second option, which is normal retirement. In fact, a lot of public safety plans, don't even have early retirement. They don't have any reduced early retirement. They only offer normal retirement. And another reason for choosing normal retirement is it just seems like a natural option. In particular, if you're trying to come up with something that's thought of as cost neutral, it's already an inflection point for member behavior, right? You're already creating an inflection point for when you're looking for members to retire. So instead of retiring, if they enter drop, then the thought is, well, that should be cost neutral, which again, we'll come back to that notion of cost neutral later in the presentation. But another example or another thought is to have, even stricter eligibility requirements, even beyond normal retirement age. And one example of this is, Nebraska State Patrol Tier 1 members. For them, they have to be at least 50 years old with 25 years of service to participate in drop, whereas normal retirement is available to them with as little as 10 years of service, or if they're 60 years old, no service. And the reason why somebody might, or a plan sponsor may go for stricter requirements is if you view this as a reward for members who have rendered long service into their community. So then offering drop only to those members would seem appropriate if that's your goal. So the next design element that we'll look into is participation period. Many plans have a minimum participation period, For instance, Kansas Police and Fire requires a minimum of 3 years of drop participation. And one reason to put into place a minimum participation period would be if the main goal is to retain more experienced employees for a material amount of time. If you're looking to shore up staffing shortages, it's not as useful to have members come into drop for just a year and then leave. It's just not as helpful. Also, a smaller participation window is more helpful when it comes to goals relating to workforce management. So that smaller participation window, instead of allowing members to participate from 1 to 5 years, now it's 3 to 5 years. And that helps with, again, workforce planning. Another element of participation period is whether or not to put on to apply a maximum participation period. In my experience, 5 years is a very common maximum, but it can certainly be longer, and it can even not exist at all. Again, employees could participate for as long as they like, but applying a maximum participation period can be seen as a risk mitigation factor to prevent large drop account balances and the negative cash flows that will result from when those large drop account balances are paid out. Depending on how interest is credited on drop accounts, this can have a significant impact on a system's cash flows. It also helps from a more HR perspective. It also helps to alleviate concerns younger members may have about senior employees possibly staying too long and delaying promotions. That's less of an actuarial concern, but it is something that employers and sponsors, may have to deal with. And then finally, there are also plans who have a specified participation period. For instance, Prince George's County of Maryland has a drop period of 3 years, and that's it. You sign the paperwork, you participate in drop for 3 years, and then you fully retire. Obviously, this has maximum predictability for workforce management goals, and also has the most predictable cost impact among the options. And this, which of course is true for any design feature that removes variability. Now for irrevocability, the question is, can members change their initial election regarding participation and drop, or even their election of the drop period? When it comes to irrevocability, members probably do appreciate the flexibility of being able to elect to participate in drop for 5 years. Life circumstances happen, they revoke their election without penalty. However, making elections irrevocable does lower the risk of anti-selection and can also help with workforce planning. One example of one illustration of anti-selection could be, for example, if a member enters drop and chooses to enter drop for 5 years, but a couple of years into it, local legislature decides to pass large pay increases of say 20%. If the member is able to revoke their election, then they can exit drop and come back as a regular employee, continue to work until that large pay bump is reflected in their benefit, and then retire. So when you compare that scenario to a member retiring normally instead of entering drop, it does increase the cost because they would not be able to just retire and come back and get the larger benefit. However, if you have a drop where it allows revocable elections, they do have that option, resulting in an increase in costs. Most plans do not allow members to change their election at all or not without penalty. For example, if a member decides to exit the drop prior to their elected period, they may lose interest credits on their drop account. And then another option is, some plans only allow members to lengthen their drop period. and this is true for Kansas Police and Fire. And again, this provision is in place to help shore up any staffing shortages, so members can always stay longer, they just can't leave earlier. So what percentage of members' accrued benefits should be credited to their drop account? This is what we call the drop percentage. Most plans that we work with credit the full accrued benefit. However, we have worked with a couple or seen a couple where they do credit less than the full accrued benefit. For instance, Missouri State Employees Retirement System credits 90% of the accrued benefit to their drop account, and Iowa Municipal Fire and Police actually credits 52% of the accrued benefit to the drop account if the member enters drop upon reaching eligibility. So once they first reach retirement eligibility, if they enter drop on that date, only 52% of their benefit is credited to their drop account, but that percentage increases 2% per month until it reaches 100% of the accrued benefit 2 years after retirement eligibility. So obviously what that does is that provides incentive for members to stick around after their initial retirement eligibility, mitigating costs and retaining employees. Crediting less than the full accrued benefit can help mitigate any additional costs due to the drop. This is particularly true for plans that provide a backdrop due to the risk of anti-selection that Ryan mentioned earlier, which is the case for the Missouri State Employees Retirement System. They credit 90% of the accrued benefit, but it is a backdrop. So during drop, it comes to the question of, should drop participants receive cost of living adjustments on their benefits while they're participating? One reason for granting COLAs during drop is that it encourages members to participate in drop instead of retiring. Because if you have a drop program, I'm assuming it's because you want people to take advantage of it. However, not granting COLAs does mitigate costs. Obviously, this question does have a greater impact for plans that allow members to participate in drop for longer periods, and especially in the cases where the plan allows members to participate for an unlimited amount of time. Another thing to consider regarding the appropriateness of granting COLAs during drop is that members are receiving a wage while they're participating in drop, and that does provide protection against inflation. So that is one thing to think about, is that they do have inflation protection while participating in drop through the wages that they're earning. And most plans do grant COLAs while members participate in drop, at least from my experience. But some do not. Nebraska State Patrol and Ohio Police and Fire are two examples of plans that do not credit COLAs or do not grant COLAs during drop. Now, once a member decides to enter in a drop and their benefits start being credited to their drop account, then the question becomes, okay, what kind of interest crediting rate should be applied to those drop accounts? One option is to not credit any interest. Again, that's an option for sponsors who are looking to keep the costs down. It's also used as a tool to hold members accountable who exit the drop early, and so it's used as kind of the stick to keep that from happening. Another option is a fixed rate interest crediting rate, which Wichita Police and Fire credits 5% per year to member drop accounts. Obviously, this results in more determinable costs. And then also any sort of market-related instrument, or any market instrument can be used to determine the interest crediting rate on drop accounts. Depending on the underlying security and the maximum drop period, this can potentially be a source of significant cost variability. But one example of an employer who uses market securities to determine the interest crediting rate is Ohio Police and Fire. They credit the 10-year U.S. Treasury note, but they do have a window to cut down on some of that variability, so that the interest crediting rate can't be more than 5% and it can't be less than 2.5%. Continuing on the next slide are a few other options for how to determine interest crediting rate. And one is a fund-related rate. And when we're talking about, when we say fund-related rate, is we're talking about the system's asset fund, okay? So we're talking about interest crediting rates related to the system's return on assets. I just mentioned an example on this slide of using actual return on assets less 2%, but not less than 0%. The actual return on assets less 2% being a way to help pay for the floor on the interest crediting rate of 0%. If you do decide, if a sponsor does decide to use a fund-related rate, then comes the question, okay, should it be based on the actuarial or the smooth rate of return or the market rate of return? I haven't worked on any clients who use the smooth rate of return, but I would venture to guess that it does result in kind of a smoother workforce planning. For instance, you wouldn't have the risk of members waiting until a really, really good year to retire and get that interest credited to their drop account. But some of the drawbacks of using a smooth rate of return is that the interest that you credit to drop balances is obviously not always related to the actual return on fund assets. So you have a little bit of asset liability disconnect there. In addition to using a fund-related rate, another option is to use an assumption-related rate. And you see this down in Oklahoma with the Oklahoma law enforcement retirement system. For their drop accounts, they credit the greater of the actual returns on assets, less 2%, and the long-term assumed rate of return used to generate valuation results, which I believe is for them was 7.5%. So every year for their drop accounts, again, it's the greater of that 7.5% and the actual return on market value of assets less 2%. As Ryan touched on earlier, this obviously increases the cost to the system because you're always crediting at least the fund's assumed rate of return, and it's more costly compared to if the member had simply retired. And then a final option that I have seen is allowing members to direct drop account investments. And so this is a situation where it's not really a notional account anymore. You are depositing the member's accrued benefit into their own account, into an account where they direct the investments. From a plan standpoint, this basically has the same cost impact as crediting no interest. The plan's obligation is to credit the monthly benefit payments to the account, and whatever interest or investment returns accrue on top of that goes to the member. And so once a member has finished their drop participation and their drop account balance is final, then the question becomes, what kind of payout options do we want to offer our members? Most plans that I've seen, particular ones I've seen, only offer a lump sum payout of the member's drop account. So the member exits drop and they get a fat check and they can roll into an IRA or buy an RV, whatever, whatever they decide to do. But some plans do allow members to receive their drop accounts and installment payments. Examples of these would be Oklahoma firefighters and Ohio Police and Fire. One of the potential risks of allowing members to receive their drop account installments, well, first off, there's the question of for how long can members receive their drop accounts installments? But then also, what kind of interest crediting rate is being applied to those drop accounts? And depending on your interest crediting rate, for instance, if you go back to Oklahoma law enforcement, if you're crediting a minimum of 7.5%, the longer those drop accounts are out there accruing that 7.5+%, the more significant the cost impact is to the system. And I'm not saying it's necessarily irresponsible or not doable. I mean, after all, it all depends on the contributions coming in, with regards to whether or not something's affordable. But it is a risk consideration, and we're actuaries, so we think about risks. And then the final design element that we're going to touch on today is required contributions. And the question is, so during drop, because drop participants are sort of a hybrid between retirees and employees, the question comes up, okay, so should they have to continue to make required contributions like regular employees? And a couple of reasons for doing so would be that requiring contributions during drop, again, helps to mitigate any potential costs. Another one is that, theoretically, if a member had retired instead of participating in drop, then they would have been replaced by a new hire who would be making contributions. So you kind of consider the potential lost revenue by not requiring contributions and potentially not and hiring fewer new employees. Regarding the question of whether or not employers should continue to make required contributions during drop, from my experience, most employers do continue to make those contributions on payroll for drop participants. Some of the benefits of doing this is that it spreads the annual cost over a longer period, and as well as a larger payroll. And both of these help to result in more stable contribution rates. However, some employers do stop contributing on a member's pay once they enter drop, and for those exact same reasons, but in reverse, it can result in less stable contribution rates. Now, on the next slide, we'll go into some examples regarding required contributions. Some examples of employers and employees who continue to make contributions would be Kansas Police and Fire Retirement System. They require full contributions from both employers and employees on drop payroll. Jacksonville Corrections Officers actually require a reduced contribution rate from their drop participants. I don't work on Jacksonville Corrections Officers. I believe that this lower contribution rate was put into place to help mitigate any additional costs brought on by the drop program. And then Ohio Police and Fire requires a percentage of the members' contributions to be credited to their drop account. And this percentage varies based on the number of drop years of service. Employer contributions also continue during drop, but those are not credited to the members' drop accounts. And one thing to note about that approach to member contributions is that crediting member contributions to their drop account is kind of the same as requiring no member contributions, because it's going to be paid in and shortly thereafter, or relatively shortly thereafter, it's going to be taken out and paid back to the member. An example of employee contributions stopping but employer contributions continuing would be Oklahoma Police Pension and Retirement System. Employees no longer contribute once they enter drop, but the employer does. But with one tweak is that the employer makes contributions on only half of the drop payroll. For that system, however, they also offer a backdrop, and very few members participate in forward drop, and so for them it has less of an impact whether you go one way or the other. And then finally, an example of where both the employee and the employer require contributions stop would be Lincoln Police and Fire Pension Fund. So for Lincoln Police and Fire, because contributions stop, benefits start, these members from a liability standpoint, from an actuarial standpoint, really are very, very similar to a retired member, a regular retired member. And so with that, I'll hand it back over to Ryan now to discuss this notion of a cost-neutral drop.
Thank you, Aaron. So what is the notion of a cost-neutral drop is the question. In essence, I think a drop would be considered cost-neutral if the drop benefit package is one valued is less than or equal to the normal retirement benefit package. In other words, we could say a drop is considered cost-neutral if your revenues and savings exceed your cost of the drop. So what kind of revenues are you going to receive if you implement a drop plan? Well, if you're going to have additional employer and employee contributions due to the longer careers. Since your goal is to delay retirement and you're working in a drop period for a period of time, you're going to have contributions over that period of time. That's going to bring in a source of revenue. What savings are generated? Well, that varies greatly dependent upon plan design. But if you're delaying commencement of benefits, that's going to provide a savings to the plan. If you have COLAs that are payable under your normal retirement benefit package, say a year after you retire, then you implement a drop at the same time, but don't have COLAs credited to your drop account, that's going to provide an additional savings to your plan. Drop interest crediting rates, which we've touched on. If you have an interest crediting rate that's lower than what you return over the drop period, that's going to create some additional savings. And then members not taking retiree healthcare or other benefit programs. If you have someone enter retiree healthcare when they normally retire, but in the drop, they delay that for a few years, that's going to create an additional savings. So costs on the opposite, or on the other hand, the additional value of a drop benefit due to earlier commencement, if your plan design allows for your drop benefits to commence earlier than your normal retirement, that would be an additional cost. The drop interest crediting rates higher than the amount that you would receive would be an additional cost. And of course, higher administrative expenses. You're implementing a drop program and maintaining it, and your members working a longer career, you're going to have higher administrative expenses as well. So how do we determine if a drop is cost neutral? Well, we perform a drop cost neutrality study. This requires estimating member behavior without drop. So this is what makes it a little bit difficult to value the cost. For some of our clients, we perform a cost neutrality study, and in order to estimate that behavior without drop, we use the retirement rates that were in place prior to the drop being put or implemented, and that helps us determine the value of the without the drop plan, and then we compare that cost to the value with the drop plan and to see if it's cost neutral or not. Some drop plans were implemented with the stipulation that it would not have a negative financial impact on the plan. So they require a cost neutrality study to be performed. And these can be performed every 3 to 5 years. And if the program is determined to be not cost neutral, then these boards have the authority to amend the drop. Here, you just have to be careful when you're amending your drop. Is it going to keep your employees from taking it? Just eliminating what one of your goals would be to keeping employees in the workforce. The study can also include the impact on retiree healthcare, compensation, and training costs as well.
Oops.
The next slide, Aaron.
Okay.
Thank you. And finally, we have drop alternatives as our last slide. This is a whole another discussion on its own, but we list them here just to give you a general idea. We have our partial lump sum options, our partial lump sum option payments, working after retirement programs, and increasing your normal retirement age is a way to keep people employed or in your workforce longer. With the partial lump sum option and the partial lump sum option payment, these are two cost neutral optional benefit forms of payment that can be implemented into your plan today. It's a optional form of payment similar to a joint and survivor benefit. And here we take the benefit amounts and create an actuarially equivalent lump sum. And then the member's monthly benefit is then reduced by that amount. So with a partial lump sum option, the member would elect a certain percentage of their accrued retirement benefit. In this example, we say 30% as an actuarial lump sum. Then their future benefit payments would be reduced by that amount as well. With the partial lump sum option payment, the member elects a number of months of their monthly accrued benefit to be converted to a lump sum. So say you're receiving a retirement, or you're going to receive a retirement benefit of $1,000. You want 36 months of that payable as a lump sum. So that's 36,000 as a lump sum. Well, now your $1,000 needs to be reduced to account for that $36,000 lump sum payment. This promotes cost neutrality along with the partial lump sum option. Next slide, Aaron. All right, with that, we want to say thank you. We can be reached at these emails if you have more questions, but we're open to questions now as time allows. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, we have a number of questions from the Q&A function, as well as a number of questions that were fielded before the webinar started. So first is great presentation. I'm hearing things that I've never heard before, such as unlimited drop period duration and flexibility for a member to change his or her election. Doesn't the IRS the IRS code or IRSC require some rigid rules and maximum duration?
Ryan, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
Go right ahead, Aaron.
Okay. Well, in general, I'd say, IRS rules don't apply as rigidly to public retirement plans as they do to corporate plans in the private sector. And yeah, so I mean, the fact is that there are plans out there who don't have a maximum drop participation period.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and I think as you guys started, you're not attorneys, right? So
Yes.
if you have if you have questions about the sort of the IRC, get yourself a tax counsel to flesh out those provisions.
That's a great disclaimer.
Yeah, somewhat related to that, another question: in your experience, do most plans require members to roll out of their drops, or do plans allow for members to keep money with the system and earn the system's rate of return on investments?
So in my experience, it would be the former, where the member is paid out, and then what they want to do with their lump sum is up to them. Where they want to roll into, again, an IRA, or if they want to pay off any mortgage. But I don't. In my personal experience, I haven't seen very many where they allow the drop account to remain with the system and continue to earn what the system's fund earns.
Yeah, it's been my experience the same. It's been a rollout of their drops.
Great, thank you. Another question, does the retirement system administer the drop plan, or is there a separate plan administrator?
It's been in my experience, again, it's been the retirement system. It's a part of the retirement system's offering to members. I'm not saying there aren't instances where it's something that's offered outside the retirement system, but that's not something that I've seen.
Another question from the Q&A. what type of usage or take rate assumptions do you see regarding members going into drops, and how sensitive are those to interest crediting rates and or drop periods, say 3 versus 5 years?
So for one of the plans that I work on, we see about 90% participation, and the accrediting rate's around I think 3.75%, and it's a 8-year drop period. And with those factors, we still see about 90% of the participation, and the drop is considered cost neutral as well.
Yeah, in my experience, essentially the more generous the drop program is, the higher the utilization.
You know, to your, I think, initial sort of disclaimer about, you know, there are a number of different drop variations as there is imagination of the plan and plan sponsor. So there is a comment saying the city of Fresno allows drop participants or drop money to remain in the system and earn the assumed rate to the benefit of the participant. So there's one example.
Okay.
Yep. All right. And then let's see. Some of the questions that we fielded at when we first solicited for this webinar. In a closed plan with all remaining actives in the drop, what is the cost to the pension plan if the drop is extended?
I would say if you're funding to retirement and not the entry of the drop, then your annual cost to the drop will likely decline because employers and members are continuing to contribute. And it's more likely that extending the drop period will reduce costs because retirement could be pushed back further.
Great. Do you guys have any recommendations on how best to communicate how, you know, air quotes, how drop works for members?
Well,
Not good at
you
marketing.
could certainly show them the what is it, the slides 4 and 5 of this presentation. But yeah, you know, you watch NCPERS webinars and you'll be an expert on drops. But no, and I'm sorry, more serious answer would be to coordinate with any sort of communications team you may have, work with your actuary and the communications team to craft a message to members at, you know, varying levels of employment about, you know, what a drop is, what it means to participate in a drop, what the potential benefits are to you, and what it means for your personal finances, possibly if you want to go out and look for a, you know, finance guy. That's probably beyond the scope of this, but yeah. So my suggestion would be to get your actuarial team to coordinate with the communications team or supplement their efforts.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how do you avoid double dipping if you were to implement a drop program?
Well, the way I look at it is you're not double dipping. It's perceived that you are because you're collecting retirement benefits in a notional account or you're collecting retirement benefits while you're collecting a paycheck, but you're not actually receiving the retirement benefits until you exit the drop.
Yeah, and kind of a purist sense of double dipping. You know, you're talking about somebody who retires, starts receiving their benefit, comes back to work, and they continue receiving their benefit, right? So now they're receiving a retirement check and a paycheck, you know. But under a drop program, you don't actually receive any retirement benefits until you stop receiving paychecks. But outside of that distinction, I mean, it's sort of the function of a drop to behave the way that it does, and so I'm not sure that there's necessarily any way to legislate your way out of how a drop functions.
Great. Couple more questions. are there any statistics available regarding disabilities during the drop period? Meaning, I guess, if a participant who's in drop files for a disability during the drop period.
Yeah, with a lot of plans that I work on, once you hit a certain service threshold, your disability benefit kind of becomes your retirement benefit. But obviously, this is something that will be unique from plan to plan. As to how your disability benefits are defined versus your retirement benefit, and what would make it more attractive than, say, participating in drop. From my experience, I work on a dozen plus systems that offer a drop. I don't think I've seen one instance of a drop participant begin receiving disability benefits or apply for disability. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen. It's not to say that there are other plans out there whose disability benefits, make it preferable. So, Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I could say the same. I haven't seen it.
Okay. So, the conversation today has been implicitly and explicitly focused on public safety, but can drops be set up for all retirees or general or employees or teachers?
Yeah, certainly. I did offer the one example of Missouri State employees offering a backdrop. So it certainly can happen. I think one reason why it tends to gravitate more towards public safety, public safety members, is because in general, again, those members are incented to retire at a younger age, 55 or 60. And, if you're struggling to, find enough police officers or firefighters in your town to replace the members who are reaching retirement age, then a drop is one option for trying to hold on to those older members. However, when it comes to general employees who have a normal retirement age of 65 or 67, typically asking them to stick around after normal retirement age and work another 3 to 5 years, it's just less, I would generally speaking, less attractive to keep working longer at that stage in your life.
Another question. In your experience, do members who participate in drop, are they happy with their decision?
With the ones that I have talked to, they are happy. They like the lump sum of money at retirement.
Okay. And then one comment or final comment as we're approaching top of the hour. We allow one withdrawal from drop money and must take out out on second request. So I think this speaker is talking about how their drop operates, that they allow for one withdrawal, and then on the second request, the entire amount must be taken out.
Okay.
Well, Aaron, Ryan, thank you so much for this great presentation. Thank you also to everybody who's tuned in. Just as a public service announcement, the Public Safety Conference is October 27th through the 30th in Palm Springs, California. Early bird discount of $200 expires on October 4th. So you only have a couple more weeks left in order to take advantage of that savings. Ryan and Aaron will be at Public Safety and will be giving this presentation in person. So if you have colleagues who missed this, or if you have, or if you're attending, you have the opportunity to talk to them in person while we're out in Palm Springs. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks on October 3rd to provide an overview of the 2024 NCPERS and CBIZ compensation survey and to get practical insight from an HR plan professional. It should be a great webinar, and so I look forward to seeing you guys tune in a couple of weeks. So in closing, again, let me thank Ryan and Aaron, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.